With the success of Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six series, it was apparent for Ubisoft to continue their flourishing partnership with the acclaimed author and create more games based on his works. In 2001, Ubisoft and R6 developer Red Storm Entertainment did just that with the first installment of a whole new original series. So original, in fact, that it wasn't based on any of Clancy's books at all. Ghost Recon. Assuming the role of the Ghosts, a fictional US Spec Ops force, the games have you command your customized fire teams through a series of missions in order to stop a terrorist threat from causing catastrophic damage. Now, of course, this does sound quite similar to Rainbow Six, and for the most part, it is. But where Rainbow Six is more about close-quarter shooting and SWAT-like tactics, Ghost Recon is military-based and deals with longer-range weapons and open battlefields. But I don't want to get ahead of myself on how the game plays. Over the course of the Big Green's lifespan, there were 5 Ghost Recon titles, right up to the transition into the then-new Xbox 360. So today, we'll be taking a trip back into the world of Tom Clancy on original Xbox with a look at the Ghost Recon series, and see if these tactical titles are still collection-worthy, starting with 2001's Ghost Recon. The first Ghost Recon takes place in the futuristic timeline of 2008, where an ultra-nationalist regime takes control of the Russian government and placing its leader as president, allowing them to take over the surrounding countries, all with the goal of recreating the former Soviet Union. To combat this threat, the US Army sends in their elite squad of soldiers, known as the Ghosts, to assist in taking down this new threat. Similar to the classic Rainbow Six games, the story here is more of a backdrop for the types of missions that you and your team will undertake, so it's not necessarily worth following, at least it wasn't to me. I frankly just wanted to get into the action. Speaking of action, just like Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon is set in first person with an aiming reticle as the only thing you'll see, along with the HUD of course. You have an Alpha and Bravo team consisting of 6 soldiers, 3 per team, which you can assign a soldier of different classes. There's the main type, the rifleman, the support type, demolitions, and finally, the sniper. There's also specialist classes that are unlocked for use when you complete bonus objectives in a mission. These soldiers have more experience and some even have unique weapons to use. During combat, you can assign commands to your squads via a tactical map, allowing you to set where you want them to go and if you want them to hold position, go all out and attack, or just advance, with the chance to control any of your squad members at any time. And when they said this was a tactical shooter, they weren't messing around, as just going in guns blazing will definitely get you killed in a few hits. You can complete the mission with just one soldier alive, but any teammate that is out of action is considered KIA and is gone for the rest of the campaign. And of course there is the multiplayer modes for those who wish to partake in some tactical deathmatches. And everything pretty much checks out for Ghost Recon being a Tom Clancy game, but I have to admit that the controls at first were a little tough to get used to. Moving my soldiers felt a bit stiff and the tactical map felt a bit confusing at first. But the further I played along, I was starting to issue my squads to take out enemy troops on one side of the map while the other squad took on another objective, and it became quite fun. Also, your AI team doesn't screw around when it comes to eliminating the enemy. I had a tough time seeing where most of them were shooting and couldn't find them until my squad started to take them out one by one. I guess that elite training paid off after all. When it comes to presentation, Ghost Recon looks pretty basic, but then again, it did come out a year into the Big Green's life, so taking that into consideration, looks pretty good. The maps are nicely varied, and character models, when you can see them, aren't too shabby. The audio here is pretty good, just like Rainbow Six, with a nice score that's played at the right times and decent voiceover work. Usually I'll say that if you can get a hold of the PC version of a game, go with that one over the Xbox version due to ease of access and how the PC version might play better. However, the Big Green port of Ghost Recon isn't bad, and in my opinion is still playable. Again, the controls might take a little getting used to, but it's still a pretty fun time, if you want to play it on a console, that is. Just 9 months after the Xbox version of Ghost Recon was released, an expansion came out called Island Thunder. With it came a new campaign where the Ghosts are sent to Cuba to take down a new regime who wishes to keep Cuba under communist rule. But the real meat of this standalone expansion was the new maps and modes for multiplayer in both co-op and competitive. As for gameplay and presentation, it's identical to the first Ghost Recon with some tweaks here and there, especially to the controls. I don't have much to say on this except that it's more Ghost Recon, and if you enjoyed the first game, you'll love this. With Ghost Recon a new hit for Ubisoft, it makes sense that a sequel would be on the way, and in 2004, Red Storm delivered another fresh chapter for the Elite Squad with Ghost Recon 2. In an interesting turn, this sequel was not only exclusive to consoles as the PC version was cancelled, but the stories are not the same. In fact, the Xbox version actually takes place after the PS2 and GameCube versions. Now, I haven't played that one yet, but what I can tell you is that the villain, General Jung Chang-sun of North Korea, plans revenge after his attempt to overthrow the government was met with failure, thanks in part to the ghosts. So now the squad must stop Jung once more, this time for good. I can't lie, it's a bit misleading and dumb having two games with the same name and gameplay, yet be totally different with the plot, forcing the player to buy both games in order to get the whole story. Eventually I'll play the GameCube version to get the beginning of this, but I can say that this half is essentially like the first Ghost Recon. It's just filler really to get into the missions. Though Ghost Recon 2 Part 2, as I jokingly call it, does have a more engaging narrative. As for the gameplay, it stays intact here for the most part, with the new addition of playing with a third-person camera, which, once I started using, I couldn't switch back to first-person. If anything, it kind of plays and controls more like Rainbow Six 3, which I enjoyed that control scheme, so I felt right at home here. Also changed up is team commands, which are more context-sensitive button presses as opposed to needing a tactical map to issue commands. You still have that map, but it's more to see the entire level to get a sense of direction. There's also times where you must complete a level alone without your team, but you do have access to some nice gear like airstrikes and a camera on your rifle that allows you to aim without breaking cover. And just like the first Ghost Recon, this one's tough as nails as the enemy can take you and your squad out in a few hits if you don't play it safe. What's great though is now you can save anywhere at any time, so if it takes you a few tries to clear out an enemy encampment, you don't have to repeat it for the 12th or 16th time, like I did. Of course, there's co-op and multiplayer modes for split screen, system link, and online, so I expect this one to be a big hit for Insignia when it's available. Presentation-wise, there's been a huge bump in quality on the visual side of things with better-looking character models. I'm guessing due to the fact you can now see yourself as opposed to just a crosshair. Also, the stages are much more detailed, even if the frame rate takes a small dip here and there. Again though, it is a huge leap from the first game. As for the audio, the voice acting is still pretty good in both cutscenes and in-game, with some nice banter between the ghosts.
As soon as I was briefed that we'd be shipping out to North Korea, I knew this was going to be tough. Possibly tougher than anything we'd faced before. A lot was riding on us, but I knew the ghosts could handle it.
When the fighting broke out, we were sent right away, heading in-country before most of the UN troops. Word came down the pipe that something was going down, and when Captain said to gear up ASAP, I had a feeling it was big. We hadn't been in country for more than a few hours when we were deployed to secure a North Korean airfield.
Those bastards had been pounding our guys from that airfield, and it was up to us and the British Special Forces to put a stop to it.
As for music, it's still that classic Tom Clancy game soundtrack that you've come to enjoy, or at least I have. Ghost Recon 2 is a much better experience than the first game, though that's not to say that it was bad, just very rough around the edges. The third-person camera is a great addition, and making the game more action than tactical this time around may bother those who enjoy the classic style, but rest assured that tactical play is still there. Normally, I'd say the big green version is the best out of the three, but that's hard to say knowing that you're only playing half of the whole story, so if you're wanting to play this chapter of the Ghosts, you'll be getting two games, but I can confirm the Xbox game is still fun to play. Just like with Island Thunder previously, Ghost Recon 2 also received a standalone expansion a year later, this time exclusively on Xbox called Summit Strike. In Summit Strike, the Ghosts are deployed by the UN to take out a Pakistani arms dealer and terrorist named Asad Rahil, who assassinated the Kazakh president and his council after he was found selling old Soviet weapons to Middle East fundamentalists. Now it's up to Ghost Squad to discover where Assad and his army is hiding and stop their reign of terror. I have to say I actually enjoyed this story a lot more than Ghost Recon 2's, and not just because it was split into two games. While it still has that just here to get the game rolling feel to it, at the same time it felt a little more filling in narrative. As always, the conversations between the ghosts and their allies was a nice touch. Also, just like Island Thunder, Summit Strike plays exactly like Ghost Recon 2, with the only differences, besides a new campaign, being new maps and modes for multiplayer. The maps in campaign mode also feel a lot bigger, but also contained at the same time, and by that I mean you don't have to scroll around in the tactical map to see everything. It's just all there to look at, which is nice. The game also looks and sounds great, just like Ghost Recon 2, so there's no disappointment there. Overall, I think I preferred Summit Strike more, if only for the story and new levels. I wish I had more to say, but I can tell you that this one is also worth playing if you enjoyed Ghost Recon 2. With the new generation of consoles beginning to emerge, most notably the Xbox 360, it was time for Ghost Recon to hit the HD era. The newest title, Advanced Warfighter, was released in 2006 for the new Xbox, but there was also a version for the Big Green, with the developer reins handed to Ubisoft Shanghai since Red Storm was working on the 360 version. That came out on the same day as players were still using their OG Xbox. The question is, does Advanced Warfighter pull a Ghost Recon 2 again and give us two separate experiences with the same name? Well, yes and no. The plot of Advanced Warfighter is essentially the same for all versions, so there's no worry there. The year is 2013, and the current Canadian Prime Minister and US President travel to Mexico City for a meeting with the President of Mexico to sign a treaty that will unify the three countries and help combat the massive smuggling of weapons and drugs. At the same time, one of the Ghost teams, captained by Scott Mitchell, is deployed in the city to intercept a deal going down and recover a device that can disrupt wireless communications. Things go south fast when Mexican rebels enact a coup d'etat in the city, forcing Mitchell's mission to change. Now his team must locate and extract both presidents before they're killed like the Prime Minister was. Right off the bat, the story ramps up pretty quickly, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Granted, the majority of info is still related to mission brief loading screens, but now they've been combined with news reports to give it that feeling of getting intel right before you're dropped into the fire zone. Plus, your banter with the Ghost is still nice to hear, even if your squad number has dropped, which leads me into some of the changes made to the Big Green version of GRAW, which is still one of the stupidest yet funniest abbreviations of a name I've ever heard. GRAW is still a tactical shooter at its core, but where the 360 version allows you to switch between first and third person, the OG Xbox version is strictly an FPS affair, where you must complete your objectives on each map to progress, such as destroying targets or rescuing VIPs. Instead of having a squad of 3 to command like in the 360 version, you only get one soldier for this operation, but you can still issue basic commands like recon, attack, and regroup. You're also able to see what they see by way of a cam screen in the upper left corner, however the quality isn't that great, especially during nighttime missions. Speaking of HUD, it's designed like a helmet this time with all the important info displayed, because helmet HUDs were popular at the time? One thing that's a nice change of pace from past Ghost Recons is that you can take a few more hits before you instantly die. Oh, don't get it wrong, this game is still tough and you can die in one hit, but at least it's not from a stray bullet. There are checkpoints where the game will automatically save, as well as supply points that save as well as refill your ammo and health, but you have to use them carefully because of the whole, getting your ass shot off thing. As far as any problems I had playing GRAW, the only one that really came to mind was hit detection on both ends. When I'd fire at an enemy, it felt like most times they were either absorbing all the bullets or just magically dodging them, while I could get shot in the foot or get crushed by a helicopter even though I wasn't under it, which coupled with the whole sporadic saving thing would get frustrating. Other than that, this version plays fine. And of course, there's also the obligatory co-op and multiplayer modes if you can find others playing GRAW, or you can also go split screen. Presentation, though, is where most of the issues start to trickle in, mainly on the visual side. The game does look good for being on the tail end of the Big Green's life cycle. Sadly though, the frame rate isn't as great, as while it does try to stay at a decent 30 frames per second, it takes a hard dip when a lot of action hits the screen, making it near unplayable at times. Meanwhile, audio is still just as good as it's ever been, with that sweeping orchestral score when needed and great voice acting.
The Canadian Prime Minister is dead and we do not have President Ballantyne's present 20. Repeat, the President is missing. The Mexican Vice President has asked for our immediate support, so you will proceed to VIP-1's last known position, his vehicle, near Zocalo Plaza.
Mitchell, you have Captains Bolin and Abreu on site. We need you to ensure VIP-1's safety until we can arrange access for an extraction. Reinforcements from Pendleton are on the way. In the meantime, Marines at the embassy are en route to this position.
Understood. Blackhawk 4 moving to that position.
Blackhawk 4, we're getting heavy radio interference from a ground source, and we've lost the VIP's present position. I need Bravo to neutralize that jamming station while Alpha proceeds to the VIP's last known position.
Copy that. Neutralize jamming station. We'll have it offline ASAP.
I get why Ubisoft made this version of Advanced Warfighter. They wanted those who weren't able to get the 360 yet to enjoy the latest Ghost Recon, but with changes that would fit the original Xbox since it couldn't handle the next-gen design. Problem is, while this is a fun game to play, it can't handle the design they gave it. The frame rate is just too sluggish to get through that it's hard to recommend. On top of that, considering that it's easy to get a hold of the 360 version, there's no reason to play this one now. Again, I know it sounds like I'm bashing this game, but truthfully, I did enjoy it. I think if Ubisoft had toned down the visuals a bit and just tried to make a version that ran properly as opposed to just making it look as close to the 360 version as possible, it would have been held in a higher regard. For the true GRAW experience, just go for the 360 version. You could also go for the PC version if you don't mind just being able to play in first person, and from what I've heard, the PS2 version is actually worse than the Xbox edition. And that's the Ghost Recon saga on the big green. It's amazing how the games went from a pseudo-clone of classic Rainbow Six to pretty fun console shooters. Of course, the Ghosts are still going strong with entries that now take a more open-world sandbox approach, but the same fun gameplay is still intact. But Ghost Recon wasn't the last, nor the biggest Tom Clancy property on the big green. But that's for another time. Until then, stay green, my friends.